Hello, it's Cheryl Akle for the Better Reading Podcast, brought to you by Belinda Audio, BOLINDA.com. Today, we're chatting with Monica McInerney. Now, I know most of you know her. She's an Irish-Australian or an Australian-Irish. I think I'll go for the Australian-Irish writer. She's got a book out called The Trip of a Lifetime. She's written many books. She's got, you might remember Hello from the Gillespies, The Trip of a Lifetime, which we're talking about today, The Alphabet Secret, Lola's Secret, and many, many more. She's a dual citizen, I guess. Welcome, Monica.
Hello, Cheryl. Thank you for having me.
We're very lucky to have you today, all the way from Ireland.
And fresh with the jet lag too, so who knows what I might say.
Yeah, well, we'll keep you in check. Now, listen, how has this career happened? This is your 12th book?
12th novel.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
So where did it all start? Where did writing all start?
I'm a writer because I'm a reader.
Yeah,
First and foremost and 100%. And I'm a reader because I grew up with a mother who read books constantly, and I'm one of 7 kids, so for my mum to find time to read as well as, raise 7 kids, and then in fact she decided that there were quieter ways to live her life, and she got a job in the local library in the Clare Valley of South Australia where I'm from. So not only did we have books at home, after school we'd call into the library, and she had a very relaxed approach to the borrowing regulations. So I grew up with access to so many books, and I kind of laugh, but it's true. I've got a really strong memory of Mum having one of my little brothers or sisters on one hip and holding a book as well. Like that was always her escape.
Where are you in the 7?
I'm the middle. Which means I've got loads of psychological problems, apparently, which is really good and handy for being a writer too.
I'm one of 6 and I'm in the middle.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah, there
I'll
you
start
go.
asking you
Same
secret
problems.
questions.
Yeah, that's right, probably. And are all your brothers and sisters readers?
The women more than the men, but
that's often the case.
It is the case, but funny calling them men, but the boys would probably read non-fiction, which again is often the case. But all of us and all my sisters we're all writers or editors of some sort. I have a sister who's a journalist, I have another sister who writes non-fiction essays, another sister who's an editor. So we've all grown up working with words and all big readers. We've got an online a WhatsApp book club that we're trying. One of my sisters is trying to get off the ground. We recommend books to each other. We send books to each other. Mum still reads at least a book a day, and sometimes more. She's unbelievable. And I read probably 2 or 3 books a week.
And is Mum still in the Clare Valley?
No, she's in Adelaide now. My dad died in 2000, and so she left Clare about 2 years after that. And she lives in Adelaide, and she reads and plays Scrabble. That's her 2 favourite things. So it's all about words still, really. Yeah.
It's almost genetic in your family.
Yeah, I think so. And it's some people come from a medical family or a sporting family. I come from a talking family and reading and storytelling, and books are just so much of a part of that.
Yeah. So it began in the Clare Valley, but how does somebody from the Clare Valley end up living in Ireland? And you're not just an author, you're a best-selling author. I mean, you're selling millions of copies.
Oh, no, I'm not, but but thank you for imagining that I am. I'm lucky. I am I'm published internationally and in lots of different languages. So I'm thrilled about that, and still can't quite believe it. But sure, you have, every time you start the new book, you get the nerves. So each time you're starting with the first book in your head.
So how did the first book come about?
Well, I actually wrote my first book when I was 8. Did I tell you that story?
Yes, I'd love to hear that story.
In the Clare Valley, I went to St. Joseph's School in Clare, a Catholic convent school, and we had a teacher called Sister Margaret Mary Murphy, and I'm Monica Mary McInerney, so I was sort of drawn to M names. And she set us a school holiday assignment to write a book. And I went home and took that very seriously. And Dad being the railway station master, I was one of a big family. McInerney was always quite hard to spell and to say. So I thought, well, I can't write about us. But I picked this, I'll call them my family, the Smith family. And I thought, She said, write what you know.
You went from McInerney to Smith.
Well, it was hard to spell McInerney even though it was your own name. And so then I thought, well, I know about trains because Dad's a station master. So I decided I'd send this family on a train trip. And then I decided where's the furthest place I knew. And I hadn't been anywhere, but I'd heard of this place called Perth. So I wrote this story about this family that leave Clare and they catch a train across to Perth. And I called it The Smith Family Goes to Perth on the Train. That was the name of the book. And I wrote and I illustrated it. And it was on, I can picture it exactly, it was on bright yellow A4 paper and I turned around landscape and I did the illustrations and I got books and I copied like a barcode and everything on the back. And took it in, spent the rest of the school holidays reading it to my mum and my dad and my 6 brothers and sisters and the cat and the dog and the possum and anybody that would listen. Yeah. And then I took it into school and my teacher was, that's great, well done. I actually suspect I was the only one that did the holiday assignment, but because I can't remember anybody else's books. But then I got her to read it, and then I took it into our school librarian, who was a woman called Margaret Milty, so more M's, and she did this fantastic thing for a little kid like me. She asked, and I said, yes, please, and she took the book and she covered it in that beautiful thick plastic. School library books have, and then she catalogued it and put the little card at the back.
Oh,
and
how
she put
special.
it on the shelves of the St. Joseph's School Library shelves for the rest of the time that I was at school. So as an 8-year-old, I had a book that was on bookshelves.
You had a published book?
Yeah, and I've laughed and said I was the only one that ever borrowed it.
Have you still got it?
No, it would have been cleaned out, in the way that, and I'd love to see, I could probably recreate it because it's so, I know what, well, to be honest, because I didn't know what was in Perth. The family went across on the train. They got to Perth railway station, and because I didn't know what was there, I just had them waiting at the station, then they came back.
Oh, right.
So, and I've since learned you don't sum up the entire plot in the title. But that book really made a difference. And to mention Belinda Audio, all of my books are audio books with Belinda Audio, including 2 of them, Alphabet Sisters and Lola's Secret, which is the 2 books that come before The Trip of a Lifetime. And they are narrated by an award-winning Australian actress and narrator called Catherine Milty, and Catherine is Margaret Milty's daughter.
Oh, wow.
So the amazing way that life can turn in circles. Yeah,
that's amazing,
isn't that beautiful?
Isn't it?
Yeah,
that's a lovely story.
And Margaret, sadly, she died last year, and I was just wrote to the family to say, I'll never, please, just hope you all know how much she meant to me. And I got to, she knew I've told that story, and I was able to let her know what that encouragement had done to a little kid.
And so you went on to work in various roles. Tell me about those.
Well, my first job out of school, I was wardrobe girl on Here's Humphrey, which people find wildly amusing because Humphrey didn't wear pants. And so Humphrey B. Bear, obviously.
Yes, I know Humphrey.
So they said, well, obviously I was terrible at my job or avant-garde, I don't know. And then I became a scriptwriter on Humphrey, which people would also find amusing.
So you were
Humphrey
in Sydney
didn't speak.
at that
No,
point?
in Adelaide. That was made in Adelaide.
Right. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Channel 9 in Adelaide. And then I moved to London and worked in the music industry in London. And then I
Writing?
Doing sort of a bit of that, like a bit of promotion and advertising copy, but mostly just in a big live music venue, helping booking the bands.
Wow.
And that was great because that was a venue that they did a lot of secret gigs. So bands like Psychedelic Furs and the Chieftains and even the Rolling Stones did secret gigs to warm up before big tours. So it was really great for a music lover that I was. Then I moved to Sydney for a year and worked in the record industry, and then moved to Melbourne and worked at Penguin Books. As a book publicist and in book marketing.
Do you know, I did not know that you worked at Penguin.
Yeah, I did for about 5 years, and I worked on
That's
big
a long time.
international tours for Roald Dahl and Margaret Mahy and Paul Jennings and all sorts of amazing children's authors.
Right.
And then that was then I met my Irish husband and moved
in
back
Melbourne.
Right. He's a journalist, so he was working on a newspaper in Melbourne, and we met one another, and he was already going back, so I came back to Ireland with him as a souvenir. So rather than a kangaroo keyring, he brought back a wife.
He brought back somebody real life.
Yeah.
And so when was the first book to be published by a publisher of renowned? When did that happen, and how did that come about?
My first book I started writing, we moved back to Ireland and we lived there for about 3 or 4 years and then came back to Australia. That was always our plan, to move back and forth as much as possible. And we moved to Tasmania, and
beautiful,
which was really great. But it was a sad time to move there. We moved there the day before the Port Arthur massacre, and that changed, obviously, the landscape in many ways, and economically in Tasmania. And I had a lot of trouble finding work. My husband had got a job down there. And there wasn't a publishing industry in Tasmania either. And I had worked for other smaller publishers, and in Ireland I'd worked for, as a promotion, working in promotion, lots of other big authors. And I missed it, Cheryl. I missed being around books all day and talking about books all day and hearing authors talking. But it ended up being the very best thing that could have happened to me, because I couldn't get a job as publisher. I thought, how do I get that feeling back in my life? And I thought maybe I should start writing. And I was actually at the dentist, and there was a magazine, and it had, 5-minute fiction at the back. And I read one of those. I thought, maybe I could write one of those stories. And I remember borrowing the laptop I had got a job in a PR agency eventually, and my boss there became a great friend, and she said, yeah, borrow the laptop. And I remember sitting down at the kitchen table, and I got an idea for a short story, and I wrote it. And even now I can remember the feeling.
So you hadn't written long form? No,
I'd been writing loads of things, media releases and articles, and as a journalist, but non-fiction. And I made up this story. And I still remember thinking, I've just made up a story. The next night, another one. The next night, another one. It was like a dam burst. And over the next 2 months, I wrote about 50 short stories. They were flying out of me, and they were all different genres, because I'd worked with so many different authors, really literary authors, popular authors, kids authors. And I was obviously trying to find my voice with all of my short stories, and I started sending them out to see if they might be published. Back they came. And, of course, back then, it was all by post, so you had to include a stamped self-addressed envelope. So you'd come home, it was like you'd rejected yourself because it's in your own handwriting.
Terrible.
But I just took a notion. I thought, no, I'm loving writing these stories so much. I'm just going to keep going. So I read in a How to Be a Writer guide, always have one ready to go out, so your hopes aren't crushed. So you're always hopeful that one might get accepted. So I was like a flight, the air traffic controller. I knew that when one story was coming in, another one went out to another magazine, and all around Australia. And that was the days when...
So you were sending them to publishers, magazines?
Just magazines, not to book publishers, but just to magazines, because they were short stories.
Right.
And, back they'd come, but I'd have another one ready to go. And I was still writing that, and some of them were like very literary, and some were, very almost like thrillers, all different style. And then I wrote one, and it was like a family setting. It had a little twist in the tale, a lot of humour, a lot of dialogue. And that one got accepted. And that was the one I felt most comfortable writing. And I wrote another one, and that one got accepted. And then 2 days after that, magazine called For You, which is for you or for me, for you, I think. And then Women's Day accepted one, and then another magazine, which has since folded, unfortunately. But all of a sudden, and they all had the same thing in common, these short stories, and that was that they had family settings, humour, and a kind of a sadder theme through them, and plenty of dialogue. And as I realised after, that was my own audition process. That was me finding my voice. So every rejection was an editor saying, that one hasn't worked. And that's what gave me the confidence to try and start writing my first book. And that became a taste for it, which was published internationally.
And published by whom in Australia?
I entered a competition I was published in Ireland first by a publisher there called Poolbeg, who also discovered people like Kathy Kelly and Marian Keyes and Sheila O'Flanagan. They were the first of the, popular women's fiction titles. And I came runner-up in that writer bestseller competition from Tasmania. I posted it from Tasmania to Dublin. And then Penguin, who I'd worked with years before, a friend told somebody at Penguin, they said, we hear of this, can we have a look? And I thought, great. I was so thrilled about the Irish one. I thought, And Penguin read it, and they said, we'd like to sign you up as well. So that was my start.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, and that's 18 years ago now. So I've been pretty much writing full-time since then.
I had Jeffrey Deaver in recently, and we were talking about, writing and going to college or university. They say college. But, when you get when you study courses, he was talking about the fact that he teaches writing now. And it made me think that, you have so many vocational courses, like, you study teaching, you become a teacher, you study doctor and you become a doctor. But you can study writing all you like, but it doesn't necessarily mean you become a published author.
No, I was lucky. I think I did writing courses by osmosis. I'm a writer because I'm a reader. I just have to keep saying that. I learned how to write by being a big reader. What keeps me as a reader turning the pages? What makes me care about characters? And then trying to make that happen with my own writing. Also, all the time, like I worked as a book publicist in Ireland and Australia for about 10 years, and met and talked to so many writers, different, everyone from Tim Winton to, as I said, Roald Dahl to Carol Shields, all sorts of people who wrote in different genres. And I'd sit in on their interviews and I'd hear them talking about it. And there were certain things that were really in common for all of those. One is, take it seriously. If you don't take it seriously, nobody else will. Turn up. Be serious about it. It won't work the first time. Do loads of drafts. Put your heart and soul. Tell the truth. It'd be fictional, but you can still tell the truth. And I heard all those, and they were big published writers. I worked with Pulitzer Prize winners. I met Toni Morrison, for example. So people who were very serious about their craft. So it was
like you were doing not an internship, but an apprenticeship.
Yeah, really. It really was. As I said, by osmosis. So I got so many amazing tips by just listening to interviews. So when it came time, there I was in Tasmania, flying short stories left, right and centre, and then starting a novel. I think, okay, now remember such and such saying that. And then sometimes it wasn't even as conscious as that. It was more about me, right, okay, it doesn't work, but they don't always work first time. So maybe there's a character out of that short story you can put into a different situation. So I knew from the start that it's not a matter of you write one book and you're suddenly, international best-selling author. It doesn't work like that. And that still held me in really good stead. And I still read. two or three books a week.
You've got a really unique voice in your storytelling. And in a way, I'm going to describe it as shabby chic. It resonates, and I've just jumped on what you were saying there in terms of honesty, but it is like, in a way, it's kind of a big family life, and to the reader, it feels crazy and authentic, but to you, it's a lot of considered work, isn't it?
Absolutely.
That's what I think is so unique about writing, how unique that voice is.
Yeah, and every writer is. Like, we're sitting here surrounded by bookshelves now, and because every human being is different.
Yeah.
And that's, as writers, I like to joke that writers are walking compost bins, because every experience that every person we meet, every setting we visit, every conversation we had, it goes in and it mulches. But you and I could spend a week together and have exactly the same experiences, but you would transform that into something quite different than I would, because of our different upbringings and lives, etc.
You could get the same plot line and you can give it to you and you can give it to me, and it will be completely different.
Or Jeffrey Deaver, but he would kill everybody and I might not do that.
Right, you'd have them all around for tea.
Yes, exactly. But exactly, I mean, that's what happens. You do, and that's the beautiful thing about writing, and that's why there are so many stories in the world that everybody has a different approach to life and a different sensibility. And certainly I do probably 10 drafts of each of my books, and people say, oh, they're so easy to read, it's great, and you think, oh, well, that's great, because I've worked really hard to make them easy to draft, easy to read.
How long does it take you to write a book?
I think about each one for about a year, before putting pen to paper or finger to keyboard.
Wow!
Because I imagine them, I picture them, because each of my books I set up this new one's a little different because I'm revisiting characters that I loved writing. But number 13, which I'm working on at the moment, they're just people in my head at the moment. But I'm getting to know them. I have them talking to one another. What I like to do is sort of set up a whole new family system, and I do what I call throw a emotional explosion into the middle of this family that I've set up, and watch the fur fly, basically. What makes something big happen to that family, and see how they all react, and what that's going to do to their relationships. And I don't know at the start what's going to happen at the end, ever, with my books.
Don't you?
No. I have a really good friend in Ireland called Sinead Moriarty, who's brilliant. She's a #1 bestseller and wins awards.
She's got the name for it.
Hasn't she? Yes, she has. And she has a completely different writing. She plots almost like a filmmaker. She works with her editors, but she does it all herself first, and then almost workshops it with her editors and goes through it scene by scene, chapter by chapter. So she knows at the start exactly what the last chapter is going to be. And I'm the opposite. I have framework. and I know what that explosion is, and I know the characters really, really well before I start writing. But then that's what keeps me coming up to my attic every day to write, to find out, again, to say, because I'm a reader, that it's like I'm writing the book I want to read. So if a reader is surprised by something in my book, it's because I was when I wrote it. Because it's that magic trick of reading and writing, Cheryl, I reckon. Do you know that I sit in my attic in Dublin and I have this, like, for me it's a film. I have the whole book as a film in my head, in a way, the characters. And then I turn those images into words onto the page. And if I'm surprised or if I laugh at something or something makes me cry, because my books have the light and the shade. And then, like in this case, a year later, here I am in Australia, and I've already spoken to a couple of people who have already read The Trip of a Lifetime, and they've turned those words back into pictures in their heads. And I just think that is so extraordinary, that the thought transference of reading and writing, and that every emotion I felt while I was writing it, if I've done my job properly.
Well, I mean, if you're a good writer, that
works. If you work hard at it, you want to put, and you want to make it, make that family feel real, make those characters feel real, make people
but
feel what they do.
But I think you touched on, being truthful. I think where I give up is where I don't believe any of it.
Me too.
Yeah. You don't believe it, so it's like, well.
Or you don't care. I think sometimes it can be both. Like you say, I believe that character, but I don't care if you do. If
whatever
something terrible happens to you. Yeah. For me, that's the main thing. I have to care. And sometimes I've had characters I thought, I don't actually care about you enough. So
to keep you.
Bye-bye. But the ones I really care about, and Lola Quinlan, my Irish grandmother, would be one of those. So I keep coming back to her.
Tell me a little bit about The Trip of a Lifetime without giving too much away. But I did kind of think it was a little bit about yourself
and home, and it's a book.
Well,
about
that reminded me of you.
Yeah, it is. Well, it is. It came out of me completely. Yeah. It's built from me. So yes, it is about me. I'm sure. Because I realised this year I'm 52 and. It now marks 26 years I've lived in Australia and 26 years overseas, mostly in Ireland.
Oh, wow.
And I'm, for the last couple of years, I've been really homesick. It's also been a really sad time for my Irish family. My husband's wonderful younger brother died of cancer. And so I've been grieving very, very intensely, and with a very grieving family, and feeling very homesick for my own mother at the same time, and all my brothers and sisters, but needing to stay close to my Irish family. So I've felt really torn between, where is home now, Australia or Ireland? I love both. I've got family I love in both. And out of that sadness and that time of grieving came The Trip of a Lifetime, which is the story of an Irish immigrant to Australia. Lola came to Australia when she was 20, and she's now 85, and she goes back for the first time in 65 years to work out for herself where did she come from? And I'm sure that came from all those big feelings that I was having.
It's the immigrant story.
It's the immigrant story, completely.
Even, you're in two countries that both speak the same language. Yeah. It's the same story, isn't it?
And, I mean, how lucky am I can't even, look, I have 2 passports, I have dual nationality, I can travel freely between them. I can't even say, oh, poor me, compared to what refugees in this world are going through.
Who just yearn for their family. Who yearn
for that, who yearn for some some solid solidity to their life, some safety. So I almost feel like I can't say, oh, that's been a difficult time for me, because it's nothing compared to what other people are going through. But what it makes me realise is that's how I feel moving between 2 safe countries, with all the legal backing that I've got, and I still feel my heart is sore, and heart aches sometimes. Then imagine how it must be for people fleeing other places.
Talk to me, about homesickness. I think that is. I always think that it will go away after a couple of years, but it doesn't leave you.
No,
I have felt homesick for a country I didn't even know.
Really?
Well, my parents, I was born in Australia and my parents were from Lebanon.
Yes. Yeah.
And they immigrated. But for a long time, I was yearning for that country. I didn't even know it.
But it's a genetic feeling.
It is.
It's not just your heart and your lungs and your face that comes from your family. You get your emotions through, that's where your personality comes from. And if there would have been yearning for your parents probably when you were little, and you feel that.
Yeah.
I think homesickness is underestimated. I believe the 2 big feelings of the world of life life are grief and love, and kindness. For me, they're the three key ingredients of life. And homesickness takes in all of those elements, I think, because to feel homesick is you're grieving for what you've left behind. When sometimes you go back, it's not the same. So you're grieving for what should you have done? Did you make the wrong decision? My mum's fantastic, but she's 79. And I think so many tiny, ordinary moments have I missed with my mum. But she's also celebrated, she's been so thrilled that I've had this life overseas and she's visited me. I mean, it's choices.
Where are your siblings?
They're scattered all around Australia. So the other 6 are, a couple in Victoria and one in Queensland in South Australia and in the Northern Territory. So we're kind of all over the place. But we all come running and gather as often as we can. But all of those, and watching a family grieving so much for my beautiful brother-in-law brought me back to when my own father died in 2000. And so I think The Trip of a Lifetime is a very joyful book because I needed to make myself laugh while I was writing it. But it comes from a bedrock of sadness, and an 85-year-old woman is a perfect vehicle for that in a way, because there are things that old women have seen and the way they look at life, and Lola particularly is a very big character.
Do you know, I often, when I read stories of writers, you read something that they've written in their 20s or 30s, and then you read something that they've written in their 50s and 60s. And it's lovely to see the aging in the writing process. Yeah. I think writers that try and stay young, again, that truthfulness, I think, disappears for me. And that's what I think is beautiful about your writing, that you've grown up with it.
Well, I can look back at all 12 books. I mean, I started writing when I was in my late 20s, and everything, and life felt so joyous and exciting. And I started writing romantic comedies, and then I got older and
things get sadder.
And I got sadder, and all sorts of things that I'd love to have happened, like to have had a big family, wasn't possible. And so I had a lot of grieving to do about that. My father dying, and lots of good, just lots of loss. Not always about people dying, but just the disappointments and that seeps into me. And of course that has to come into my writing, because the writing comes out of me. So it's when you chop a tree in half and you can see all the rings and the dark rings and the good years and the bad years. Sometimes I feel like that's what my books are. They're slices of me that you can imagine. Oh, that book, that character came out of that sad time, and that's why I wrote that one, because that was a joyful year. And I can almost track my emotional, not well-being, but my emotional situation, I suppose, by what themes I write about with each of those 12 books.
But that's what makes you authentic.
I hope so, because I can't write a book if I don't believe with what's happening. It means too much to me. And again, because I'm a reader, because I want someone to pick up my book. And of course some people don't like my books, and I'm used to that. Yeah. Of course there's not one book in the world that everybody loves.
No,
but
that's right.
I do get a lot of emails and messages from people all around the world and in different languages. You think, wow, families, because I write families with comedy and drama.
Well. Yeah.
They're the same the world over.
Everybody
knows what it's like to feel sad or misunderstood or angry or
happy,
falling in love, falling out of love. That's all the things that I write about. So it's a shame sometimes when it kind of it can be dismissed as popular fiction or women's fiction. It's not. It's human fiction.
I hate those terms. Yeah, it drives me crazy. Yeah, that's another podcast entirely.
Is it good?
It is. I can't thank you enough, Monica, for coming in to speak with us today. It's been a real joy, and I think there's some great words in there for aspiring writers and experienced writers. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you, Cheryl.
It's Cheryl Akle for the Better Reading Podcast.